Cobra is easily one of Sylvester Stallone's best and most underrated action movies. It's a movie that embodies the 80s, everything that made that decade great, iconic, bad, and cringeworthy, as well as all the action tropes and cliches that come together in this movie. It's unlike anything else made in the 80s because it is the physical manifestation of the 80s action genre. Cobra is an interesting movie for a lot of reasons. It does not have a groundbreaking story, far from it. The story here is very straightforward, there is no message here nor some kind of critique of social issues such as movies like RoboCop or Rambo had. Rambo was much deeper than most people realize, talking about the horrible treatment Vietnam vets received upon their return to America and the lack of help at the time for people suffering from PTSD.
Nothing is over! Nothing! You just don't turn it off! It wasn't my war! You asked me, I didn't ask you!
Cobra has none of that, at least you'd have to interpret its meaning by reaching pretty far. I've seen some people do that by claiming that this movie glorifies cop violence and is a fascist piece of media, but I believe that's just extreme reaching. This movie has no message because it doesn't need a message. It's the most hardcore badass 80s movie imaginable, and that was the only goal it tried to achieve. This is when Stallone was in his absolute prime. He looked like the king of action here, wearing black sunglasses, chewing on a match, wearing a black leather jacket with a gun that has a Cobra on it.
In America, there's a burglary every 11 seconds.
This is exactly what I think about when I think of 80s action and what defines the genre. The only thing missing here would be a massive mullet, and it would be the most iconic movie ever made, just like the poster for Cobra, which I think might be easily the coolest looking movie poster I have ever seen. What's great about Cobra is how it really doesn't care what you think about it. It has a serious story, but at the same time also is self-aware and knows what it is, which is why it also doesn't take itself too seriously all the time. Marion Cobretti is a hardcore cop who honestly reminds me of the Punisher. He's the man you call when dealing with psychos or shooters because everyone knows that Cobretti will inflict justice and you'd better get a few coffins ready. He'll be sipping product placed Coca-Cola while single-handedly taking on some of the vilest and biggest scum of the earth without even breaking a sweat.
I'll kill them all! You bring in the TV or I'll kill them all! You understand?
You're a disease, and I'm the cure.
Die! Drop it!
Year-old victim was mutilated with a sharp instrument and seemed to be just as unlikely a victim as the other 15.
This is what makes him and this movie so iconic in my opinion. It's not that this movie has the best action, nor does it have a deep or even original story. It's the way Cobra presents itself, be it through an interesting choice of Miami Vice inspired visuals or the darker synth horror themes present. It's the type of movie you watch when you just want to get a Coke, some popcorn, and enjoy an evening of Stallone in his prime, kicking ass while looking like the most baddest dude on planet Earth.
You have the right to remain silent. You know what the trouble with you is? You're too violent.
What's interesting about Cobra is how they try to experiment with genre bending by including John Carpenter-inspired synth horror elements. I mean, even the soundtrack at times sounds a lot like something you'd see in a Carpenter movie and almost like he himself composed it, which is then mixed with some straight-up horror moments that might not be particularly scary or terrifying, but definitely have a dark and creepy vibe and atmosphere around them. At times this movie can be very tense and you almost feel like the writers wanted to include supernatural elements but then had the studio refuse them, which unfortunately crippled this movie a lot, at least according to Stallone, as the studio interference in the production of Cobra was very heavy-handed and extreme. The main villain here, the Night Slasher, not only has an awesome sounding name, but is also genuinely creepy due to his fixation on killing and slashing people with his iconic knife, leading a cult that wants to purge the earth. We don't find out too much about this cult, which is again most likely due to the studio cutting large parts of the story, but even without knowing anything about them, they still feel like a threat that you can feel almost all the time, even when they are not on screen, as their members include corrupt politicians and cops. They seem to be everywhere and you don't know who to trust. The movie has no issues portraying violence and does so all the time. It's not the most graphically violent movie, but I love that during the horror-inspired moments, it can get pretty dark and nasty. It definitely does not hold itself back. What's interesting about this is that this was the first and only time in Stallone's career that he tried to do something related to the horror genre. Back in the 80s, you didn't see a lot of A-list actors, especially ones as big as Stallone, within any kind of horror movie. The genre was mostly dominated by B-movie type actors, despite having legends such as Bruce Campbell. But as much as I love Campbell and his Ash Williams character, he unfortunately never reached A levels of stardom, even though he did come close with Army of Darkness.
Found me beautiful once.
Honey, you got real ugly. See this? This is my boomstick!
In Cobra, Stallone tried experimenting with genres in a way that wasn't common, and the movie definitely stands out in that regard. The Night Slasher is creepy and terrifying, and it's one of those cases where you wonder whether Cobretti will be able to defeat him, as horror movies have a tendency to often either kill their main character or end on a very dark and pessimistic note. You're not sure if he will survive, and it does add to the tension and mystery. It's a shame how much the studio cut and destroyed this movie, which ranges from rewriting entire scenes or straight up removing them, all the way to deleting hours of already filmed footage. Based on interviews with Stallone and some of the other actors, such as Brian Johnson who played the Night Slasher, the movie that ended up being shown in cinemas and on VHS was almost unrecognizable to what they had originally filmed. It went much deeper into explaining the cult and its corrupt ties, and it was also much darker and violent. One of the things I really like about Cobra is how stylized it is. It's almost like they try to incorporate certain elements from Miami Vice, such as a certain MTV music video type feeling and lots of neon lights and colors. I mean, there's a point in this movie where it literally turns into a music video while Cobretti and his partner walk the streets of LA at night as heavy neon illuminates the ground and ask the seedy underbelly of the city for information on the Night Slasher. It reminded me of Miami Vice, as that show introduced such scenes into pop culture and was almost revolutionary back in the 80s. The atmosphere of this movie feels a lot like something MTV approved. at least the way MTV used to be back then. It's very stylized and drips with atmosphere in every single shot. It's interesting to see how they experimented with these visuals and the mixing of genres, turning this movie into something that I don't think could ever be recreated again. It is similar to Miami Vice in that this style and look had an impact on that decade but also stayed back then. You wouldn't be able to remake Cobra and catch this atmosphere even if you hire better actors or write a better story. This movie belongs to the 80s. It was the peak of everything the 80s and the 80s action genre stood for.
If I find him,
Do what you do best.
So, Freddy, do you know you have an attitude problem?
yeah, but it's just a little one.
RoboCop is not only one of the best movies ever made, but it's also one of the most important influences on the cyberpunk genre, next to movies such as Blade Runner or Total Recall. Despite coming out 30 years ago, it still feels fresh for the most part, and the message and themes it tried to convey are still relevant, maybe even more than they have ever been. It's an amazing movie that not only manages to have a great story, but also great action, great heroes, and villains.
For God's sake! RoboCop, the future of law enforcement.
What I love about this movie is how it feels like a superhero origin story. It has all the elements you'd also see in Marvel or DC movies and comics, and I could easily see RoboCop being part of the Avengers or Justice League. Of course, then those stories would need to be much more violent and twisted, as RoboCop doesn't pull any punches at all. I was actually surprised how dark and violent the movie was, in particular how gory. It's not exactly horror or slasher levels of gore, but it definitely is not afraid of showing extreme violence, such as people getting their limbs blown off or tortured. It's very dark, but you almost don't notice this darkness or violence until it happens because of the more light-hearted and comic tone that the movie also has. It balances the humor with the violence masterfully, but the inclusion of humor, or rather a certain light-hearted, almost parody-like element, makes the movie a lot more twisted than you think.
Nuke 'em. Get them before they get you. Another quality home game from Butler Brothers.
I'd buy that for $1.
Because this humor isn't meant to give you a good time or make you laugh like action comedies or normal comedies usually intend. In the case of RoboCop, it's meant to be a satirical parody of real life, showing how dark modern society can be, where one moment you hear about acts of violence and the next you see an ad for sunscreen or World of Tanks being shoved down your throat.
Sunblock 5000. Protection for the new age.
The world of RoboCop is beyond screwed up, taking place in Detroit where crime is at an all-time high. The police are clearly struggling hard with the situation, and cops keep dying daily. Despite being heavily armored and armed already, it's obvious that the city needs some other solution, and so one of the most powerful, corrupt and crony companies called the OCP decides to create robotic machines that will arrest and kill anyone committing crime.
Ed, 209. We can expect 209 to become the hot military product for the next decade.
Dick, I'm very disappointed.
I'm sure it's only a glitch. A temporary setback.
You call this a glitch?
Of course, a showcase of the first prototype goes horribly wrong, and the company decides for an even darker solution, fusing humans with robotic parts rather than creating a full machine. What's crazy about this is just how corrupt and evil the OCP is, almost on a fascist level, a comparison that becomes even more evident considering their logo literally looks like the flag of the Third Reich. After a man gets torn apart by a failed machine, the company's first thoughts are not about the dead man, but rather about the fact that the showcase failed and how much money was lost. The entire movie is supposed to be satire, which is why a lot of moments feel like parody and why the humor sometimes seems out of place. That was intentional. The movie makes fun of typical 80s action movies that had over-the-top violence and action with macho characters whose entire line of thought was that more and bigger guns solve every problem.
You know what the trouble with you is? You're too violent.
This is one of the reasons why there is so much blood and gore in the movie. Anytime someone gets shot or blown up, it's heavily exaggerated and doesn't seem realistic at all, which is in line with a lot of cliches and tropes that were popular in the 80s. In RoboCop, a character such as Alex Murphy can get shot over a dozen times by very heavy weapons, get his limbs blown apart and still live. People can lose their hands and barely even scream as if it's nothing but a scratch. The movie criticizes the idea that more and heavier guns will solve crime or lower it. The villains here are genuinely evil and sadistic. They get no sad backstory, there are no moments where the movie makes us feel anything but hate or contempt for them. Their only goals are to steal, kill, and cause as much chaos as they can. They don't deserve our sympathy, they don't deserve our mercy. They are scum and there is only one cure for them.
You probably don't think I'm a very nice guy, do you? Buddy, I think you're slime.
If RoboCop had been made today, then these villains would have most likely gotten some sort of sad backstory to let us understand how and why they turned this evil. You can see this trend today where there are movies and TV shows dedicated specifically to villains such as Cruella or the Penguin. Now, I don't think that's a bad thing. The Penguin TV show in particular is really good and fun, and at the end of the day, it all depends on whether the writers and directors are competent or not. But it's interesting to see how RoboCop does not bother to do any of that. It portrays villains and corrupt individuals as what they really are, and it also highlights how there will never be an actual cure or solution for and against these people. Evil and sadistic humans will always exist as long as humanity has not nuked itself. The idea that more guns or deadly machines will cut down crime is nonsense because there will always be outlaws and troublemakers. It's why RoboCop ultimately, even after defeating the villains of this story, doesn't actually solve anything. He didn't cut down on crime, he just removed a bunch of evil people whose spot was instantly taken by the next group of evil assholes. Having said that, looking past all of the parody and satire, the action in RoboCop is still amazing and a lot of fun to watch. In a way, Robo reminds me of a reverse Terminator, where instead of being specifically made to kill, he actually has to uphold the law and protect the innocent. As morally dark and wrong as his creation and existence is, he himself was programmed to be a hero and a good guy. He does kill when he has to, often in extremely bloody ways, but he also tries to avoid doing so if he can. For most of the movie, he's an unstoppable machine, not stopping even when shot upon, being mostly bulletproof.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me. Your move, creep.
Alex Murphy is a very interesting character. In many ways, his character fits the typical action hero of the 80s. He has a sense of duty, is religious, and also a cowboy who likes the thrill of the action. We don't actually get that much character development for him as Alex Murphy specifically. In fact, Alex Murphy as a human barely gets any character development, but what we do get is more than enough. Despite having so little screen time, he still manages to come across as likable and a decent person.
Role models can be very important to a boy.
Proceed to Gans Pharmaceutical Company on blind. Assist unit 59.
Okay, I get a kick out of it.
Which is extremely important considering his fate. When he gets turned into RoboCop after being brutally shot to pieces by gangsters, we feel for him even more because we got to see his previous self. We got to experience him as a human, so watching him as a machine for the rest of the movie is a feeling of pity, sadness, and even anger. Anger because you know exactly that something like this could happen in real life. Sure, we might not be on the technological level of fusing humans and machines the way it's shown in this movie for now, but we'd certainly already reached a level of moral decay and corrupt crony business practices. People that would turn humans into cyborgs, not caring about the person itself and only caring about the money, fame, and social status it will give them, already exist. In fact, they exist in droves, licking their greedy paws just waiting for an opportunity or experiment like is shown in this movie.
There will come a point where no job is needed. You can have a job if you want to have a job for sort of personal satisfaction, but the AI will be able to do everything. So,
Your company built the fucking thing. Now I gotta deal with it? I don't have time for this bullshit.
It's a topic that has also been masterfully explored in BioShock, where a lack of regulations and rules caused the downfall of Rapture, but also led to some extremely twisted and fucked up human experiments and addictions. I will be honest, seeing Murphy be turned into RoboCop hit me really deep. Anytime he's hurt or slowly remembering his past life, I almost feel the same way as when you see a helpless animal or child being hurt or abused. It makes you feel more anger and pity for them than if you saw a grown human experience the same thing. And maybe I'm just screwed up myself, I don't deny that. But part of me felt more sympathy towards Robo because he felt like something else. Neither human nor machine, almost like an alien entity. Which was of course also the intent of this movie. It's deeply philosophical despite all of the action going on. It makes you wonder what defines a human and what defines a machine.
I can feel them. But I can't remember them.
With a touch of elegance. Hey, have you thought it all over? Why not make me an offer?
Since the movie's release, there have been a lot of discussions going on about whether RoboCop was still Alex Murphy or an entirely new being. Some people claim that Murphy died and that this machine simply has his brain and memories but doesn't know how to handle and deal with them. Personally, I disagree heavily with the idea that RoboCop is not Murphy. They are one and the same, changed of course, but still the same. If Robo has Murphy's brain and memories, then he is still that person. His brain has never been disconnected from him, nor did the OCP manage to erase all of his memories. Sure, they did remove almost all of his body parts and turned him into a machine, but it's still Murphy. He is a changed person, and you could make the argument that he's therefore someone new. And that would be true. But it's still Murphy fundamentally. It's still his brain and his memories. It's amazing to me how deep this movie is, despite at first glance seeming like just another action movie. A lot of this is due to the great soundtrack. The main theme here is iconic, but it also sounds heroic and sad at the same time. It fits perfectly to the story and is one of those themes that gets stuck in your head for a while. This is coupled with the great performances from all the actors, but especially from Peter Weller playing RoboCop. The other actors do a fantastic job, the villains are fun and memorable, but Robo is the main star of the show. And to me, it's simply mind-blowing how Weller manages to convey a large range of emotions despite his character mostly talking in a very dry and emotionless tone. The Karate Kid is one of the most important movies made in the 80s. It changed the way we look at martial arts today and made karate popular in America. It might seem surprising today, but back in the 80s and 70s, martial arts wasn't anywhere near as popular as it is now. It wasn't mainstream, nor was there a lot of information about it. Fighting styles such as karate or kung fu were seen as exotic, and the mainstream view of the arts was violent or foreign because most depictions of martial arts were simply seen from the fighting aspect. Previously, Bruce Lee had some level of success when Enter the Dragon came out over a decade before Karate Kid. The movie sparked a whole genre and spread Kung Fu's popularity, but only on the big screen, and even then most movies featuring such fighting were usually B or C movies with very niche audiences. At that time, most people viewed any Asian fighting as kung fu, even if it wasn't, and there were a lot of myths being spread around it. Martial arts was seen as mysterious and dangerous, not something anyone could do or join. You had to be born for it or be a member of some kind of secret society.
For 2,000 years, the sacred art of the ninja has been guarded in the East.
Remember the day I found you.
Now, it has come to the West. The deadliest art of the Orient is now in the hands of an American. American Ninja.
High above the streets of Los Angeles, he must fight the killer who was once a friend. Ancient Japanese warfare explodes in America. It's the ultimate martial arts adventure. No one can survive. The Revenge of the Ninja. Revenge of the Ninja.
Beyond the imported niches of Hong Kong Kung Fu and Japanese samurai movies, there just weren't that many other martial arts films available. Karate Kid changed all of that in a massive way and is the main reason for why karate gained mainstream popularity in America.
The Karate Kid.
Hey, what kind of belt do you have?
Canvas. You like? JC Penney 398.
In the 80s, martial arts was firmly in the action genre. The heroes you'd see were Stallone, Schwarzenegger, or Chuck Norris. Big muscular men full of testosterone who used their hands the same way they used their weapons, to kill as many enemies as they could. These movies were full of violence, blood, and gore. The characters were larger than life, and neither their bodies nor their skills were something the average Joe could ever dream of attaining or accomplishing. What makes this movie so interesting is how the hero of the story is just a regular teenager. He has no special powers, he's not some kind of former hardcore special forces warrior or badass. Even his body is skinny and clearly not that of someone who works out. Daniel is relatable even if you're not a teenager anymore because he's just a regular guy. There's nothing extraordinary about him and he also never acts that way, although he's also no pushover. He has a sense of honor and stands up for himself or his friends when he has to. The first time he gets into a fight with a bully, he's unable to defend himself and gets beaten up by Johnny. We feel for Daniel in that moment because most of us experienced bullying, be it physical or verbal. We know how humiliating and painful it can be, especially if you're the new kid just like Daniel. His suffering is not portrayed as weak, nor is it shown as a sign of cowardice. It's raw, real, and sad. In other movies, the hero would just shoot or stab his opponent, but here, you feel how powerless you can be in such a situation. The movie forces us to see him cry after getting beat up and his new friends abandoning him. The worst part about this is that it's not a made-up story you'll only see in the movies. This happens all the time, every day, and often leads to extreme depression and certain events in schools that shock the entire country. It is absolutely wild to me how there are people out there genuinely believing Daniel to be the bully, because apparently when he stepped in to help Allie while she was being verbally and physically abused by Johnny against her will, he started a fight and deserved to be beaten up. These people apparently can't separate the joke from reality. Johnny was always the bully in the original movie, just like his asshole sensei John Kreese. It seems like some people think that Allie belongs to Johnny like an object, despite her being his ex and them having already broken up at this point. It was Johnny who took her radio without permission and started harassing her, and it was him who destroyed her radio in a violent outburst. Like it or not, but he has all the qualities of a guy that would grow up to be a man beating his woman while getting drunk working a shitty job.
Not bad enough you took a shit in my powder room.
You said that's where I'm supposed to go?
Yeah, I didn't know you were going to take a shit.
Okay. We'll figure this out, alright? Just quit bitching at me.
Daniel didn't need his permission to talk to Allie, nor did she, and even if they were still together, any decent person would step in when seeing that things might escalate. Johnny harassing and destroying her belongings is escalation in its purest form. Throughout the movie, Daniel gets bullied not just on screen. It's clearly stated that bad things keep happening off screen, and even Cobra Kai confirmed this, making it definitely canon. Johnny learns this behavior in the dojo because he hangs onto every word that his sensei says.
Mercy is for the weak. Here, on the street, in competition, a man confronts you, he is the enemy. An enemy deserves no mercy.
Their victims suffer in silence. They feel ashamed of telling what they are enduring. In the film, Daniel does this several times to both his mom, Allie, and even Mr. Miyagi. The movie depicts these scenes in uncomfortable ways and forces the viewers to endure the bullying just as much as Daniel. He's unable to stop it, and after being nearly killed by the Cobra Kai gang, experiences a mental breakdown.
It sucks for me. I hate this place. I hate it. I just want to go home. Why can't we just go back home? That's it. I don't understand the rules here. I want to go home. Up and let's see if we can figure out the rules together, okay? What about your bike? Safer taking a bus.
I don't think most people understand the significance of this scene and moment, because this is not only the beginning of change for Daniel and his journey to finally stand up to his bullies, but it's also a moment that changed how Americans, and in particular parents, view karate. If before it was seen as mystical and too violent, then now the perception started to change into something that was needed and could potentially stop bullying. School bullying wasn't widely talked about in the 80s, despite being a regular occurrence. A kid in school could get jumped by a pack of boys, beating within an inch of his life, while the teacher would look the other way or just throw up his hands and say that boys will be boys and this is how they work. And while this attitude has changed since then, these things still happen. The message Karate Kid sent was that there are always ways to stand up for yourself, fighting your bullies without turning into one yourself or engaging in violence for the sake of violence.
By digging to grave. Karate here. Karate here. Karate never here.
It struck multiple chords with mothers, seeing martial arts could not only teach their child some self-respect, but also might get them around the male figures they needed.
You're the best friend I ever had.
Are you pretty okay too?
The special thing about this movie is that it doesn't portray karate as something over the top or mysterious. You don't have to be a ninja to learn it, all it takes is a good teacher, dedication, and a bit of discipline. As Daniel learns to fight, he also learns to control his anger and emotions, something he had issues previously. The movie shows the good sides and bad sides of martial arts and how deeply fighting and philosophy can be connected. Brute force is one thing, but using your emotions the right way is a lesson Johnny should have learned long before Cobra Kai. John Kreese is a perfect example of a bad teacher. His philosophy might not always be wrong, as striking first can be helpful or even necessary in certain situations, but his entire worldview is built on making enemies and basically creating bullies. The people who you struck first and showed no mercy to can also end up being the same that will want to seek revenge against you and might even pay you back in ways you probably won't like. The fighting in this movie is also never shown as overly violent, which actually feels surprisingly refreshing, especially for an 80s movie, as normally you'd see a lot more violence on screen. In fact, it feels like the movie is actually critiquing that behavior by using John Kreese and Johnny as examples of how practicing martial arts for the sake of violence can lead to a dark path.
Sweep the leg. You have a problem with that? No, Sensei.
Even though Johnny and his gang are clearly shown to be the bullies, most of them are not mindless bots. Really, the only one who seems to be a criminal in the making is Dutch, who for some reason really wants to hurt and kill Daniel.
Hey, I'm talking. Come on, make a move! Hey! Come on. You know, points or no points, you're dead meat.
We can see more and more how shadows of doubt start to appear within the gang, first with Bobby trying to stop Johnny and Dutch from almost killing Daniel, and then we slowly see Johnny start to doubt himself. Despite being a bully, he's not shown to be completely heartless or even sadistic as some bullies can be. I think it's a real shame how Cobra Kai completely removed and changed the ending of Karate Kid when even Johnny accepts Daniel's victory and hands him the trophy. It was the perfect ending and might have even been the start of a new friendship or Johnny simply trying to change, possibly with Bobby acting as the voice of reason. Of course, then we wouldn't have a pretty decent TV show that spans 6 seasons and we'd miss Daniel, Chosen, and Johnny teaming up like absolute badasses.
No, ex-degenerate, man. 8 a.m. tomorrow, I'm a senior. I've got 1 year to make it all work. And that's what I'm gonna do.